Hi everyone, and welcome to the April edition of Superstitious Science Insights. This edition will be talking about scientific vocabulary instruction. April's edition will start with an introduction where we review the agenda, learning intentions, and success criteria. Then we'll move into what research says about science vocabulary. Then we'll talk about vocabulary within the 5E model. We'll move into strategies that help vocabulary stick, and then a closing where we'll share some big ideas and ask you to reflect. I'll end with references and resources that will help you get moving. Our learning intention is we are learning how and when to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. We'll know we succeeded when we can explain how and when to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. Why this matters? Well, vocabulary is often taught first before students truly understand the concept. What you'll learn is when to introduce vocabulary in the 5E model and how investigation drives language learning. The key shift here is that students need to experience the concept first, so we need to introduce the word as the label for what students discovered. Here's what research says about science vocabulary. Students build deeper understanding when vocabulary is embedded in investigation, not introduced in isolation. So students need experience before terminology. Concepts should be explored and observed before the formal words are introduced. They need vocabulary in context. Words taught during investigation connect to meaningful lived experiences. They need language for reasoning. Students use vocabulary to explain evidence and communicate scientific thinking, not just recall definitions. And they need to revisit their vocabulary repeatedly. Vocabulary deepens through discussion, writing, and application across multiple contexts. The key insight here: scientific vocabulary should be the language students use to explain science, not just memorized. So now you should be meeting your success criteria. You're starting to be able to explain how and when to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. The 5E model naturally creates the right conditions for vocabulary to be introduced at the moment students are ready for it, just like research says, after building conceptual understanding through exploration and experience. The key principle here is concept first, language second. Students experience the science before learning the formal terminology. So this is where you're starting to see again how and when to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. So let's take a closer look at the 5E model and where vocabulary instruction fits in. During the engage portion of the inquiry model, the purpose is to activate curiosity and surface prior knowledge about a phenomenon. Students observe, they encounter a phenomenon, ask questions, and share their thinking. There's no formal vocabulary yet. Students describe what they notice using their own words. Formal terms are intentionally withheld. The teacher now listens. This stage reveals student thinking and misconceptions before instruction begins. During the explore phase of the inquiry model, the purpose is for students to investigate and gather evidence to build conceptual understanding. There's hands-on investigation. They conduct experiments, observe patterns, collect data, and discuss findings with peers. Everyday language is fine here. Students continue using informal language as they make sense of what they observe. They're building the conceptual foundation right now. The experiences in this phase are what scientific vocabulary will later describe and label. During the explain phase of the 5E model is where the vocabulary is introduced. This is the moment students are ready. They've observed, they've investigated and discussed, and now the teacher bridges their experience to formal scientific language. So, They made their observations. The water on the plate is gone. So now we move into the scientific ideas. Liquid water can change into water vapor. And now we give them the scientific terminology. This is evaporation, the precise label for what students already understand. So now you're starting to understand when to introduce vocabulary within the 5E model. During the evaluate phase of the 5E model, the purpose is for students to demonstrate understanding by using vocabulary accurately while explaining science concepts, not by recalling definitions on a test. Students make scientific explanations by articulating ideas clearly and completely using formal language. They use scientific reasoning to connect evidence to claims, showing how vocabulary supports their argument. They use evidence and reference specific observations and data to support their conclusions, and then they communicate all of this in writing and speaking with scientific precision, the true mark of vocabulary ownership. And this is how to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. During the extend phase of the 5E model, the purpose is for students to apply their understanding and vocabulary to new situations and contexts. Vocabulary strengthens through repeated use across multiple contexts, moving students from recognition to fluent application. Students need to apply, which means they explain results using scientific vocabulary. They need to discuss by using terms in peer conversation and collaborative reasoning, and they need to write by composing scientific explanations and accurate terminology. And this is how to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. There are strategies that help vocabulary stick. Effective vocabulary instruction in an inquiry classroom is explicit and is introduced at the right time when students need the language to communicate their scientific thinking. So here are some research-supported practices to help with that. You introduce after exploration. Formal vocabulary follows direct experience and investigation. Student-friendly definitions. Clarify meaning using simple, accessible language initially. Visual models and diagrams. Connect words to visual representations for deeper understanding. Structured discussion. Provide opportunities for students to use new words in conversation. And remember to revisit across lessons. Integrate vocabulary into multiple activities and contexts, and make sure to get those words up on your science word wall. And this is how to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. So here's the big idea. Scientific vocabulary is the language students use to explain their understanding of science. It's concept first, language second. When vocabulary is introduced at the right moment, students move beyond memorization and begin thinking and communicating like scientists. Okay, let's reflect. Let's revisit our learning intention and success criteria with a quick fist to 5. So, our learning intention was we are learning how and when to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. So, using a fist of 5, meaning a 5, I could teach it to others, or a 0, I still need help. How are you feeling on your success criteria? I can explain how and when to introduce vocabulary within the 5E inquiry model. Great, thanks for participating. Well, here's your answer. Vocabulary should be taught explicitly and after students have investigated and they need the language to label what they discovered during the explain phase of the inquiry model. Below are references and resources. These resources reflect a consistent research-based message. Students learn scientific vocabulary most effectively when it is introduced through inquiry and used to explain real phenomena. Scan any of the QR codes below to access any of these references and resources. What's next? As the year winds down, we'll look at how preparing materials, organizing science kits, and planning ahead can set you up for a strong and confident start next year. In May, we'll shift our focus to being supplied for success. More to come.